perspective of almost looking at nations as if they were people, and looking at the traumas that nations hold, the patterns that nations hold. So I look at their history, I look at their astrology, I look at their stories, I look at their personalities of nations to try and help readers and try and help people who are making decisions understand that when we look at nations in this way, some of the perhaps intransigent looking issues, actually, just as for individual healing, a healing can be found, a resolution, a resolution can be found.
Right, because one of the things that struck me from the book, Hope, is that you say that both the USA and the UK are perhaps the most divided countries in the world.
Yeah.
What do you mean by this exactly?
Well, there are some very, very, very good books on this. One being a book called The Spirit Level, and that I refer to in Hope, which shows that when countries are unequal, and I'm talking in terms of opportunity, social mobility, and ultimately, financial, the haves and the have-nots, then that inequality really does play out on every level. And what the Spirit Level book showed is that such inequality is unhelpful at the very best, and problematic and dangerous at the worst for everybody in that society. It just divides people. People do lose hope. They lose hope of possibility. America had this idea of an American dream, that as the inequality has got wider and wider, the 1% and the 99% for many has become the American nightmare. And when this inequality gets to the level that it has grown to, both here and in the States, those that have tend to move to be more selfish. So things like social cohesion, social opportunities, infrastructure, basic education, all the things that hold a society together and promote the well-being of a society as a whole tend to fall apart. And that's very much what's been happening with the States, and very much we are in danger of here, although I do feel a greater positivity here for a healing of that than at the moment I see in the States.
Okay, because obviously here in Britain we're on the verge of the Olympics starting.
Exactly.
Why Britain, first of all, and what is the opportunity here for Britain as the rest of the world focuses on us?
I don't just think it's for the Olympics. I also think the Diamond Jubilee has a great part to play. And, as I write Hope and all my other books, and as I share my understanding, it's very much that all these things play out on many, many different levels. And what we see happening on the physical level, as it were, the physical realm, is just one of many, many different levels of consciousness exploring itself. And I do feel that as we go through this transformative opportunity of the shift that the Mayans talk about, not the rubbish about the end of the world, but, the end of an era that's really set in many ways separated us from the larger understanding of who we really are and the interconnectivity of all that is. As we really come, I hope, to the end of that unsustainable era, new understanding is expanding and emerging. And I think for us here in the UK, the Diamond Jubilee and the Olympics are both helping us to energetically as well as physically find ways of coming together again as community. And I also feel that on spiritual levels and on energetic levels, the actual Olympic torch, which was lit at the Temple of Hera, the goddess of the hearth, the mother goddess, in Greece back in May, that journey held by 8,000 people over 8,000 miles and reaching every part of the UK, and all that the Queen is doing to visit so many parts of the land through this year, it's energizing our reconnectivity between ourselves, and also I believe between ourselves and the land. And we have a very, very, very ancient communion between ourselves and this amazing land that, you know, we call England and Britain and the United Kingdom with Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland. But the most ancient name for Britain was Albion. And I found that name now being used. I've used it all my life, but I'm finding that name now being used by many, many more people. And for me, it's almost like a sign that reconnection and that healing of that connection is happening. And when that happens, as it does when someone individually heals within themselves, that ripples out. That consciousness, that healing, just ripples out throughout our collective psyche.
Okay, I'd like to talk about the weather as we Brits do. Because it sort of ties in with what you're saying, because we've had so many extremes of weather, not just in Britain, but all over the world. What do you think is going on there, really?
Well, for me, I mean, on a very physical level, inevitably with climate change, any heating of the Earth will actually lead to more extreme weather patterns. I've written a lot about this in various articles as well as some of my books. But I would say that the shift of consciousness that's happening for us on a collective level is also a shift of consciousness of Gaia. I mean, the ancient Greeks named the earth Gaia, the living goddess of the earth. And back some years ago now, a scientist called James Lovelock brought forward what he called the Gaia hypothesis, that the earth is interconnected at a very profound level. He at that point would not acknowledge the earth as a sort of a living consciousness, but many indigenous primary peoples do, and I certainly do, and work with other non-physical dimensions of Gaia's consciousness. So for me, Gaia and ourselves and all the beings that have lived on her and with her are part of a sort of a co-creative evolutionary consciousness. So we shouldn't be surprised to see, as we go through this transformative moment, that she is as well. And I always say, the more graceful that we can expand our awareness, the more gracefully we can move from that old dismembered perspective to a remembered understanding, the more we can move gracefully from a worldview that is based on essentially fear and separation to one that's based on love and communion, the more graceful she will be able to.
Yes, because obviously in Britain we've had lots of rain over the last few months. Some people see this as a rebalancing for all the dry periods of weather we've had, whilst others see it as a type of cleansing or washing of the land. What's your take on this?
All the above. And I mean, from a very physical, from a very mundane level, the jet stream is moving south, which is why we're getting it in the main body of the UK rather than northerly, where it usually does. And you may have heard the last day or so that the jet stream is now beginning to move slightly further north, so that hopefully next week and for the Olympics, if the jet stream is where it usually is, then we should be getting warmer, sunnier weather. But I feel it's all of that. I mean, I've worked with the weather from a spiritual, energetic perspective for many years, and I do see the weather mirroring us, and us, we are co-creative evolutionary partners. But as we wake up, as we sort of begin to see our realities in different ways, we begin to understand that deep interconnectivity, not just on a physical level, but the physical representing, as it were, the consciousness.
Right. One more thing about hope is you talk quite a little bit about money. Isn't the real problem with what's going on in the world based on money? Because a lot of people see that as the root of all the ills in the world today.
Well, the Bible said it's not money, it's the love of money that's the root of all evil. And I think that's very wise. Money, at its most fundamental level is energy. But that energy has been distorted, and especially over the last generation, and even more so over the last probably 10 or 12 years. And there has been a sort of level of dysfunctionality that really has become epidemic, and the money system, the monetary system, the financial system now is a dis-ease in that respect. The ancient Greeks saw money as sacred. They used to hold the gold at the temple, the altar of the temple of Athena, the Parthenon in Athens. And they asked Athena, as the goddess of wisdom, to oversee their use of money, their use of gold, so that it moved to support people. And we've lost that sense of money as being sacred. And I do believe, and I've been writing articles on this, we need to return to a sense of money as being sacred, in the sense that its flow supports people and planet, rather than the greed. I mean, the level of speculation now, the derivatives market, which used to be, in my good old financial days, a form of insurance to cover the uncertainty of business, general insurance, has now grown as a sort of a monster. A virus has grown. The derivatives market, which is all speculation, is now 20 times as large as the entire global economy of products and services. Derivatives trading, basically manipulation and speculation, is now something of the order of $1.2 quadrillion a year. Now that is not healthy. Anybody's measure. So I've been writing quite a bit on behalf of the World Shift 20 group that I'm on, and in my newsletters and in Hope and elsewhere more recently. Both the problems with the financial system, but also what we can do. Because we can do things, but it takes our will to do that. There are many fairly straightforward things we can do as a collective to resolve this issue and return money to its sacredness, return the financial system so that it actually supports people and planet.
Right. If you had the choice between the redistribution of money or the complete removal of money, which would you choose?
It's a really great question.
Yeah.
I actually feel that this is a question that is of its time, because as we expand our awareness, I feel that we will naturally move to something that is beyond money as we've known it. But we're in a transitionary process. My view at the moment and over the next few years is that I feel that we can do some radical but simple things to stop the speculation. A financial transaction tax, for example, that very clearly targets hyper-fast transactions, which are 2/3 of transactions, which have nobody making any sort of overview of them. They're completely computerized and I feel are likely to cause a major crash at some point. They will. I mean, there's no doubt about it, they will. So I think a global financial transaction tax against hyper-fast transactions and against speculative transactions would actually stop a vast amount of the issues very quickly. And I also feel that there should be an immediate separation between so-called investment banking and so-called retail banking, which used to be the norm, and that all investment banking should be done on behalf of clients and not the banks themselves. I think if we put those three things into immediate manifestation, immediate action, a huge amount of the corruption, the manipulation, the speculation would stop overnight. Then you start to actually work with real money to support real people and the planet, and you start doing so in a way that is balanced and can actually support redistribution, because so much of the inequality and the lack of redistribution has actually been based on this ridiculous amount of speculation. The other thing I'd put into place is something that other people are suggesting, which is within organisations, the top management income should be capped at no more than, say, 20 times the average employee. And those are things that used to be the norm. You know, this is not rocket science, and this is not, you know, radical woohoo, never